The tension at the reception desk was unmistakable. For the fourth time, the desk clerk's voice carried a note of exasperation as he addressed the elegantly dressed woman standing before him. "Ma'am, I'm afraid we simply cannot understand what you're trying to communicate," he said, his nervous glances darting toward the small crowd of onlookers gathering nearby. The woman, Akiko Tanaka, remained perfectly composed in her navy blazer, her hands folded gracefully in front of her. Everything about her posture suggested calm authority, yet she had not uttered a single word in English since entering the Grand Palace Hotel. Behind her, her young aide was a picture of panic, frantically scrolling through translation apps on his phone, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "What's our next move?" whispered another staff member from behind the marble counter. "According to our system, she's reserved the penthouse suite, but she refuses to communicate in English, Spanish, or even Korean." The sound of approaching footsteps cut through the mounting tension. Diana Sterling, the hotel's notoriously demanding general manager, strode across the polished floor with characteristic authority. Her arrival promised either resolution or escalation. "Good afternoon," Diana announced with manufactured politeness, positioning herself at the counter. "I'm Diana Sterling, the general manager. How might we resolve this situation?" Akiko Tanaka offered a respectful bow and responded in fluid Japanese, her tone measured and courteous. Diana leaned forward, speaking with deliberate slowness. "This is the United States, ma'am. To receive proper service at this establishment, English communication is necessary." The lobby fell into an uncomfortable silence. Akiko offered no response, maintaining her dignified composure. Diana turned to her staff, her diplomatic mask slipping to reveal clear frustration. "She's creating an unnecessary disturbance," she muttered. "This behavior is completely unacceptable." The murmur of the crowd grew louder, and the atmosphere shifted toward judgment and impatience. Diana signaled to a security officer. "I need documentation of this incident for our records." The aide stepped forward desperately. "Please, you must understand, she's one of Japan's most influential business leaders. She's disrupting operations in a premier hotel," Diana replied curtly. "We don't have time for charades or silent protests." Akiko's hand moved slightly, then returned to stillness. Her silence wasn't submission, it was power waiting to be unleashed. Marcus Chen had been observing the scene unfold from across the lobby. The maintenance supervisor set down his cleaning supplies and approached the tense gathering with quiet determination. What happened next left everyone speechless. Marcus performed a deep, traditional bow, one of genuine respect and cultural understanding. When he raised his head and met Akiko's eyes, he spoke in flawless Japanese, his voice warm and welcoming. "Please accept my sincere apologies for this inconvenience, honored guest. How may I assist you today?" For the first time, Akiko's serene expression showed a flicker of surprise. Her eyes brightened with recognition and relief as the icy tension in the room began to melt. She responded softly in Japanese, and Marcus nodded with complete understanding. He turned to the bewildered desk clerk. "Ms. Tanaka wishes to complete her check-in process," he explained clearly. "The penthouse suite. Here are her credentials." The rapid clicking of keyboard keys broke the silence as the reservation was processed and room keys were prepared. The immediate crisis was resolved, but the consequences were just beginning. That evening, Diana's office felt like a fortress of ice. She sat behind her imposing desk, tapping her pen in a steady rhythm against the dark wood surface. When Marcus entered, she didn't acknowledge his presence immediately. "Mr. Chen," she finally began, her voice deceptively pleasant. Your theatrical display this afternoon was quite memorable. She rose from her chair, her tone growing cold. However, there's an issue. You exceeded your authority. Allow me to clarify your position in this organization. She slid a document across the desk. Effective tomorrow, you'll be reassigned to basement maintenance and kitchen sanitation duties, including the grease traps. That's the appropriate work for someone in your position. Marcus felt anger surge within him, but he controlled it. He thought of Sophia, his 8-year-old daughter. This job was their lifeline. He met Diana's gaze steadily. Understood, ma'am. As Marcus reached for the door handle, it suddenly opened without warning. Akiko Tanaka stood in the doorway like an immovable force, her aide visible behind her, looking confused. She had come to personally thank the helpful staff member, but the heated conversation within had stopped her at the threshold. She had heard everything. Diana's confidence wavered, but she quickly attempted to recover. Ms. Tanaka? Is there something you require? Akiko ignored her completely, her attention focused on Marcus. She addressed her question to Diana in careful English, each word precise and cutting. Ms. Sterling, I couldn't help but overhear. Is it standard policy at the Grand Palace Hotel to penalize employees for showing kindness and professionalism toward guests? Several staff members had paused in the hallway, drawn by the tension. That's not the situation at all, Diana stammered, forcing a brittle smile. This is simply an internal personnel matter. Internal personnel? Akiko raised an eyebrow elegantly. You consider cultural sensitivity an infraction? You treat guest assistance as grounds for punishment? Each question struck its target perfectly, leaving Diana with nowhere to retreat. Ignoring the stunned manager completely, Akiko turned to Marcus with genuine warmth in her eyes. Mr. Chen, isn't it? Marcus could only nod, still processing what was happening. I would very much like to hear your story, if you'd be willing to share it. Shall we continue this conversation in the hotel lounge? I would be honored, Marcus replied quietly. And with that, the most powerful person in the room walked away from the mahogany desk, side by side with the maintenance worker, toward the quiet comfort of the lounge. Marcus sat straight in his gray uniform, feeling distinctly out of place among the luxurious surroundings. Across from him, Akiko Tanaka prepared tea with her own hands, refusing to let the server do it for her. She lifted the teapot with both hands in a gesture of profound respect, pouring golden liquid into the delicate cup before him. Please, she said in Japanese, offering him the cup. Thank you, Marcus responded instinctively in Japanese. Akiko paused, a knowing smile crossing her features. Your Japanese is extraordinary, she observed with admiration. It carries the spirit of ancient traditions. The formal expressions, the subtle tones, this level of fluency is remarkable. Marcus was stunned. His carefully buried past had just been exposed with a few simple words. He nodded slightly. Yes, ma'am. I was formerly a professor of East Asian languages at Berkeley University. That was several years ago. I suspected as much, Akiko confirmed, as if pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. Which makes me wonder even more, why would someone with your qualifications? She left the question hanging delicately. Marcus remained quiet, uncertain how to respond. Akiko recognized his hesitation and waited with patient understanding. What is your story, Mr. Chen? She asked gently. Why would a former Berkeley professor accept such treatment in a position like this? Marcus took a deep breath, tasting the bitterness of injustice he had swallowed for so long. Something about this woman's presence made him want to share the truth. I wasn't always in maintenance, he began quietly. When I first started here, I worked at the front desk. My education and language abilities served me well. Perhaps too well. A sad smile flickered across his face. Manager Sterling resented that. She didn't appreciate how guests, especially international visitors, often requested my assistance instead of hers. She viewed it as a threat to her authority. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Eventually, she discovered a minor administrative error in my paperwork and used it as justification for demotion. She said it was maintenance work or unemployment. With a young daughter to support, the choice was obvious. Akiko nodded silently, compassion evident in her expression. She understood Diana's type perfectly. But that's only part of the story, Marcus continued, his voice becoming distant. The reason I'm here, the reason I left Berkeley, goes back to my wife. He hesitated, as if speaking her name caused physical pain. Her name was Mei Lin. We met during my graduate studies. I was an ambitious young academic, and she was the embodiment of everything I loved about language and culture. His voice grew warmer. Mei Lin taught me that communication isn't just vocabulary and grammar. It's the depth of a gesture, the meaning in silence, the ability to understand what isn't spoken. We built a wonderful life together, and we had Sophia, our beautiful daughter. The warmth faded from his expression. Then Mei Lin became ill. Everything changed so quickly. After she passed away, Marcus's voice cracked. Berkeley was no longer home. Every lecture hall, every campus pathway, every spring semester reminded me of what I'd lost. He looked at his work-worn hands. I'd stand before my students, but my spirit was gone. I realized I couldn't be the father Sophia needed while drowning in that grief. His voice steadied again. So I gave it all up. I left my professorship, left California, and came here with one purpose, to dedicate myself completely to raising my daughter. This maintenance position, he concluded, despite its challenges, gives me something my academic career couldn't. Predictable hours. I can take Sophia to school every morning and be there when she comes home. I can attend her school events and be present when she needs me. He met Akiko's eyes. I traded my career for time with my daughter, and I've never questioned that decision. Complete silence filled the tea lounge. Marcus's story of love, loss, and sacrifice hung between them like a sacred offering. Akiko set down her teacup and looked directly at him. After a moment, she sighed softly, then smiled with an almost mischievous expression. Suddenly, she switched to heavily accented English, her voice uncertain and halting, a stark contrast to her native fluency. Actually, my English is not so good. Marcus's head shot up in astonishment. She laughed at his expression before returning to her flowing Japanese. The truth is, I do wish to communicate in English, but my ability is quite limited. Meaningful conversation is difficult and exhausting for me. Her expression grew more serious. It's precisely because of that limitation that I've developed it into a test. Marcus froze as the entire front desk scene suddenly made perfect sense. That's correct, Akiko confirmed, reading his thoughts. Speaking only Japanese isn't just about honoring my heritage. It's more strategic than that. She leaned forward intently. In a world where English is considered the universal language of business, where everyone expects others to accommodate them, I search for the opposite. I want to find people with sufficient empathy, patience, and kindness to take a step toward me, rather than simply standing still and demanding that I come to them. Her voice grew compelling. I want to identify those who see a person in need, not an inconvenient obstacle. Today, Mr. Chen, you were the only person who passed that test. Akiko's smile now conveyed not just gratitude, but kinship, the recognition of finding something precious in an unexpected place. The conversation concluded, but Akiko's actions were just beginning. She didn't create a scene or demand immediate meetings with senior management. Instead, she departed the hotel as quietly as she had arrived. Diana Sterling exhaled with relief, assuming she had avoided any serious consequences. Perhaps a minor complaint in her file at worst, she thought. She had severely miscalculated the woman she had dismissed. 3 weeks later, news that sent shockwaves through the hospitality industry was announced. The Grand Palace Hotel Corporation revealed a major new investor. Significant shares had been acquired by Tanaka Industries, the Japanese technology conglomerate, and its CEO, Ms. Akiko Tanaka, would be joining the board of directors. The announcement hit Diana like lightning. She stood frozen in her office, the business journal trembling in her hands. The woman she had nearly ejected from her lobby like an unwanted solicitor was now one of the most influential figures in the corporation, someone who held her career in her hands. The first board meeting Akiko attended was held in the Grand Palace Hotel's most prestigious conference room. Diana, as branch manager, was required to present her operational reports. She entered the boardroom with her heart racing, desperately trying to avoid Akiko's gaze as she sat prominently beside the chairman, composed and formidable. After the routine financial presentations, the chairman addressed Akiko. Ms. Tanaka, as our newest board member and an expert in customer relations, do you have any observations regarding our current operations? This was the moment Diana had been dreading. Akiko smiled diplomatically, but her eyes were laser-focused on Diana. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have several observations, based on a recent personal experience at this very hotel. She began recounting her lobby encounter 3 weeks earlier, speaking objectively without naming individuals. She described a guest unable to communicate in English, a dismissive and contemptuous manager, and a maintenance worker who resolved the situation with compassion and competence. The problem wasn't a language barrier, Akiko stated, her voice resonating throughout the room. The problem was a cultural barrier in our service approach. We operate an international hotel chain, yet we punish employees who possess cross-cultural competencies. We promote managers who prioritize authority over empathy. She turned her attention directly to Diana. Ms. Sterling, do you believe that relegating a skilled employee to kitchen sanitation simply because he outperformed you represents sound management strategy? The room fell into dead silence. All eyes turned to Diana, who sat pale and speechless. This incident reveals a fundamental flaw in our system, Akiko continued, addressing the board. We require more than managers who excel with spreadsheets. We need leaders who excel with people. She paused for effect. Therefore, I propose creating a new position, Vice President of Guest Relations and Cultural Services. This role will oversee comprehensive staff retraining, establish new standards for cross-cultural communication, and ensure every guest receives exemplary treatment regardless of their origin or language. The chairman nodded enthusiastically, completely convinced. Brilliant proposal. Do you have a candidate in mind for this vital position? Akiko smiled with quiet triumph. I do. Mr. Marcus Chen. He possesses not only an exceptional academic background in linguistics from a prestigious university, but more importantly, he has demonstrated integrity, compassion, and crisis management skills from the most humble position. He understands better than anyone what needs to change. The decision was approved immediately. Marcus's appointment was effective at once. He was not merely restored to his rightful place, he was given the authority to transform the entire hotel culture. When the meeting concluded and other members had departed, only the chairman, Akiko, and a catatonic Diana remained. "Masterfully executed, Ms. Tanaka," the chairman commented. Akiko simply nodded slightly, her gaze never leaving Diana. "I chose not to terminate her," she said. "That would have been insufficient punishment." She rose and approached Diana, who remained rooted in place. "Ms. Sterling," Akiko began, her voice ice-cold. "You are not being dismissed." Diana's head snapped up, a spark of hope in her eyes. "Instead," Akiko continued, "you will remain here and report directly to the new vice president, Mr. Marcus Chen." She paused to let the words sink in. "Every day, you will learn from him how to properly serve guests. You will follow the policies he establishes. You will witness the man you once scorned succeed and earn universal respect." She leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "That, Ms. Sterling, is true consequence, but also opportunity. Now return to work. Under your new supervisor." With that, Akiko turned and walked away decisively, leaving Diana alone in the frigid boardroom. 8 months later, the Grand Palace Hotel lobby had been completely transformed. Not in its physical appearance, but in its atmosphere. The underlying tension had vanished, replaced by professional warmth. At the reception desk, staff now wore elegant name badges. Next to their names were small flags representing the languages they spoke fluently, one of Marcus's first initiatives. Marcus Chen, now impeccably dressed in a tailored suit instead of gray coveralls, made his regular rounds through the main lobby. He didn't move like an inspector, but like a gracious host welcoming friends into his home. He paused to converse in French with an elderly couple, then assisted a bellhop with luggage arrangement. Everyone greeted him with respect, not fear. "Good morning, Mr. Vice President," a young desk clerk called out. Marcus smiled warmly. "Please, just call me Marcus." His life had been transformed. He had moved into a brighter apartment with space for Sophia's piano practice. His schedule, though demanding, was more flexible than ever, allowing him to attend every one of his daughter's school events. For the first time in years, he could truly breathe. The hotel's glass doors slid open, and Akiko Tanaka entered. She wasn't accompanied by her aide, nor was she wearing a business suit. Today she wore a flowing dress the color of cherry blossoms, carrying a small gift wrapped in traditional paper. "Marcus-san," she called with a genuine smile. "Akiko-san," Marcus replied, walking over to greet her. "You're early today." "I was eager to try that new jasmine tea you recommended," she answered, offering him the gift. "A small something for Sophia-chan. It's a music box from Kyoto. I hope she'll treasure it. She will absolutely love it." "Thank you." They were no longer executive and employee, or investor and manager. They had become genuine friends. Akiko visited the hotel regularly, not for inspections, but simply to share tea and conversation with Marcus, hearing about the positive changes throughout the hotel and charming stories about Sophia. As they prepared to walk toward the tea lounge, a British family approached the desk. They appeared exhausted from their transatlantic flight and were struggling to communicate with limited vocabulary. The receptionist, instead of becoming flustered, calmly gestured for them to wait. Marcus instinctively started to approach, but before he could move, something remarkable happened. Diana, who was overseeing the lobby operations, had already assessed the situation. Without any trace of her former irritation or impatience, she approached decisively. She didn't attempt to communicate with the British family directly. Instead, she turned to a nearby staff member, one whose name badge displayed a Union Jack. Her voice was clear and professional. "James, could you please assist these guests?" The young man immediately stepped forward, bowed respectfully, and began speaking to the family in perfect English with a London accent. The exhaustion on their faces instantly melted into relief and appreciation. Diana observed until she was certain everything was properly handled before quietly returning to her duties. Akiko watched the entire scene from a distance. She wasn't just observing Marcus. She was witnessing a system functioning in perfect harmony. She saw Diana, though still serious, acting with precision and professionalism, utilizing the resources Marcus had implemented. She saw an employee confidently solving problems. And she saw Marcus, no longer just a bridge between cultures, but the architect who had built all the other bridges. The family's relief, Diana's professionalism, and Marcus's quiet satisfaction, all were the fruits of the seed she had planted. She smiled with deep satisfaction. She had been right all along. The most important language, in the end, is always spoken from the heart.